Good day. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris Schultz, Environmental Compliance Manager in Central Office Design. I specialize in wetlands and endangered species. I'm a biologist, but today I'm going to give you a bit of a history lesson. This is the history of MoDOT's involvement with a cave. That history is tied to a road, a town, and a tragedy. It's a history that spans 55 years and is still being written today. Some of you may know nothing about this topic. Others may know quite a lot. There have been books, podcasts, and social media posts about various aspects of this story, but today I want to give a different perspective, a MoDOT perspective, since this is part of MoDOT's history as an organization. I'm not going to talk about conspiracy theories, serial killers, or enter into speculations. If you are interested in those topics, I'm providing a list of resources at the end of this presentation. I should also mention that I am from Hannibal, born and raised there and still live there today, so I've known of bits and pieces of this history most of my life. I was born not long after the initial events and grew up with my parents warning me never to go into caves. Before we start on our history lesson, I want to talk about why MoDOT, and in particular my office, deals with issues involving caves. In Missouri, there are almost 8,000 known caves. This is according to the Missouri Speleological Survey database of 2022. 71 records of these caves are on MoDOT right-of-way, and there's over 600 records for caves within 500 feet of MoDOT roads. My office reviews highway and bridge projects for potential impacts to natural and cultural resources, and we ensure that federal and state laws are complied with during highway and bridge construction. Caves are important aspects of natural and cultural resources because they may contain threatened or endangered species. There may be archaeological or cultural resources associated with the cave. Sometimes caves have an important historical significance, such as the cave that I'm going to be talking about today. They could also have geological significance, such as the formations that you see in these pictures that are on this slide. They could also have important implications for groundwater and surface water recharge, so they impact clean drinking water. They are also important in many of the partnerships that we have with not only federal and state natural resource agencies, but also non-governmental organizations that are interested in caves and cave exploration. They're also important to keep in mind to know about our roadway and our right-of-way integrity. What's going on below the surface can have important implications to the driving surface and to the drainage on our rights-of-way. MoDOT has established relationships with various caving organizations in the state. The Missouri Speleological Survey, or MSS, works with MoDOT through an agreement that was signed in 2007 to access their data of the 8,000 or so caves throughout the state, while also supplying them with data of our caves that we find on right-of-way and giving them a chance to catalog and perhaps map the caves if it's feasible. We also work with the Cave Research Foundation. These folks also explore caves and also can potentially gate caves to protect endangered species that reside within them. We work with the Missouri Bat Census, local caving grottos, or also known as caving clubs, the Missouri Department of Conservation, and the Missouri Department of Natural Resources at the state level, and then also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the federal level. A quick word about safety. This presentation is not intended to spur anyone into entering a cave either as part of your job or recreationally on your own. Caving can be dangerous, and no one should be entering caves as part of their employment with MoDOT unless they have the proper training and skills. If you desire to cave recreational on your own time, please make sure you visit websites like the one listed above and get proper training and guidance from experienced cavers. Now, back to our history lesson. This is a topographic map from the 1950s showing Hannibal, Missouri, and the highways leading south out of town. The two to focus on are the one labeled 79 and the one along the riverfront. Those were narrow, windy roads not suitable for carrying the increasingly heavy traffic as more people purchased automobiles and as trucks got heavier. There's a cement plant south of Hannibal in the area marked as a quarry, and I am sure that factored into the decision to build a better road in this area. This is a topographic map from the 1970s that shows the new road, the new Highway 79, that was constructed in the 1960s. In the 1960s, MoDOT contracted with J.A. Tobin Construction Company out of Kansas City to build this new section of Highway 79 that would tie into old Route AA around the area of the Mark Twain Cave south of Hannibal. The new road cut the north face off a prominent hill on the south side of Hannibal named Ides Hill, and it cut through the southern slope of another hill called Lover's Leap Hill to the southeast. Old 79 became Route T, and old Route AA became Bluff Street and is now a dead end along the riverfront. But during the course of these improvements, something happened. On Wednesday, May 10, 1967, 3 young local boys disappeared and have never been seen since. These boys lived on the south side of Hannibal, very near the highway construction, and they were quite adventurous. Long before video games and social media, kids back then played in the woods and neighborhoods in and around Hannibal, and that was the case for Billy Hogue, age 13, Joey Hogue, age 11, and Craig Dow, age 14. So you can all get your bearings straight. Let's talk a little bit about the south side of Hannibal. This is a Google Earth aerial photograph from 1996, 29 years after the boys went missing. But conditions in this aerial are much like they were in 1967. There wasn't a lot of progress in the area until the new Stoll School was built in 2006, but more on that later. Just to point out, Ides Hill and Murphy's Cave lies below this hill. Lost Boys Cave and also Stoll School Cave, which I'll be talking about in this presentation, are in this general vicinity. This is Lover's Leap Hill. This is what's called the Cut, or the new Highway 79. The old Stoll School is located here. This is where the boys would have gone to school. The building still stands today, but is no longer used as a schoolhouse. The new Stoll School was constructed in this vicinity back in 2005, 2006. And at that time, Fulton Avenue, which runs along here, was relocated and ties into Highway 79 in this location now. The Hogues lived in this vicinity. I'm not sure if this arrow is pointing to the correct house, but it's one of these houses, so they lived very near the construction site. Craig Dow lived somewhere in this vicinity back here along Union Street. Murphy's Cave is a very complex cave system below Ides Hill. Initially, the boys were thought to have become lost in Murphy Cave. This is the system whose north face in this vicinity here was broken into during the new Highway 79 road construction. Although the cave system was known to Hannibal residents since 1883, new entrances were opened during the construction. It was not unheard of for kids to enter into and even become lost long before construction of the new highway. There were known entrances to Murphy's Cave throughout the area. Here's another picture of some of the additional openings that were discovered during construction at Murphy's Cave. Note the townspeople are standing in the future roadbed. The reason much of the early attention was given to Murphy's Cave during the search was because eyewitness accounts placed the boys here, and the boys were seen entering. They were not seen exiting the cave. The system was searched thoroughly many times, including areas of fresh breakdown in and near the north passages that was caused by blasting. But to this day, there are people who believe that the boys are still in Murphy Cave. Although no one saw the boys leave Murphy, eyewitness accounts taken during the first couple of days of the search allowed for a timeline of sightings to be developed. That's what this picture depicts. The graphic shows points of interest and eyewitness accounts of sightings of the boys. It also illustrates that the last place the boys were seen was not at Murphy's Cave, which was here, but rather in this vicinity here. This is position 28 on that previous graphic. This is the last place the boys were seen, on top of the second terrace of the road cut. At 5:15 p.m., the janitor in Stoll School looked out of room 202 while he was working and noticed the three boys standing on the hillside. He watched them for a moment, then turned away. According to the known history, he was the last person to see them. Below this hillside, and not far to the northwest, construction crews had broken into the ceiling of a cave system in several places a few days prior. The boys had discovered those entrances during their adventures and had told others about them. They were also known to have entered them prior to May 10th. This information became known to searchers on May 11th, a day after the search started. By the weekend, much of the search effort shifted from Murphy Cave to the new cave system at the base of the highway cut. By then, some big names in the caving world had made their way to Hannibal to join the search. The search was led by Bill Karras, president of the newly formed Speleological Society of America, or SSA, and chief of the National Capital Underground Rescue Team. He's shown in the foreground of the photo at the right. This is Bill Karras. He was flown to Quincy, Illinois on Air Force Two and driven to Hannibal in a state police convoy. Conway Christensen of St. Louis was chief of the Hondo Underground Rescue Team and vice president of the SSA. He also joined the search. And they were also joined by three of the best speleologists in Missouri, Tex Yoakum, Lang Broad, and Jerry Vineyard. The picture on the left shows some cave openings in the roadbed. These are areas that were uncovered during the construction. They're areas that the boys may have entered into. Some of these were filled on Wednesday evening after the boys disappeared, but before they were reported missing. They had to be re-excavated. The upper right photo shows the search operations at the new road cut cave system, and in the background, a large piece of equipment in front of Murphy's Cave. So this gives you an idea of where the cave road cut system lied in relation to Murphy's Cave to the northwest. As experienced cavers joined the search and the vastness of the cave system was exposed, it became obvious that they needed some sort of way to keep track of which passages had been searched. Those who were experienced cave mappers were assigned different parts of the cave to survey, and each mapper was to bring their surveys to Tex Yoakum, who would then put them together into one large map. The only maps and description that are known to exist today are the ones from Lang Broad. Shown here is an early sketch and notes from him. Note the name of the cave in the upper right. It was known as Rescue Cave initially. Incidentally, we did not know that these and other notes and sketches you're about to see even existed a year ago. MSS found these in their archives. Here are some more sketches. On the left, you'll see a sketch from Earl Barnes. He was assigned to map the surface features in relation to the known openings. Also note the name change from Rescue Cave to Lost Boys Cave. This took place on the 14th of May of 1967, which incidentally was Mother's Day. This is the broad map. You'll hear more about this later, but it is the only surviving Lost Boys Cave map that we know of, and although it was an amazing discovery to have this, it led to some confusion in the early summer of 2021, as you'll hear about later. The official search lasted for a month and ended on Sunday, June 11, 1967. It was and remains the largest cave rescue operation in the U.S., and it's also the only one where the subjects being searched for were never found. Concrete was poured into the cave openings, most of which were either under the road ditch or under the future pavement of Highway 79. The mayor of Hannibal also ordered that all wild cave entrances in the city limits of Hannibal be sealed. And on this slide, you'll see some thoughts from Bill Karras and also Tex Yoakum expressing the frustration that they came up empty-handed. As I was conducting research for this presentation, I came across an interesting entry into the Highway Commission minutes from June 15th and 16th of 1967. This is perhaps a purely coincidental occurrence, but less than a week after the search ended, a representative from the Missouri Speleological Society came and talked to the Highway Commission. You can see here that they asked the Commission to be notified of any intersections of cave passages with construction activities on the highways, and they also requested that they have an opportunity to make maps and study the caves. This is interesting because it's also a forerunner to the current agreement that we have with the Missouri Speleological Society that was drafted in 2007, 40 years after this event took place. It's also strangely prophetic to current events, as you'll see, especially the part about preserving caves and using sections of culvert pipe. This is an incident that happened about 13 years after the Lost Boys incident. It's probably not cave related, but it's historical nonetheless. This shows a slide area that developed on Highway 79, just south of where the search was taking place. This is an entrance to Lover's Leap, which is the park on top of Lover's Leap Hill. It initially took a steeper path up the hillside to the east of where it currently sits today. But somewhere in this vicinity is where the boys were last seen. In 1997, 30 years later, sinkholes were observed in the vicinity of where the original entrance to the Lost Boys cave system was discovered in 1967. This is the first mention that I can find of issues that can be tied to the cave system underneath the relatively newly constructed road. Shown in this drawing are green and pink dots showing where some of these sinkholes that were discovered in 1997 were occurring. They were in the ditch line just off of the highway, but they were unknowingly at the time in the vicinity of where the original openings to Lost Boys Cave were found in 1967. I've heard accounts from MoDOT retirees from the maintenance and concrete crews talking about filling voids in the ditches and doing patches in the driving surface to fix holes from slumping pavement in this vicinity. In 2006, and again, this is when the new Stoll School was being built, a new discovery took place. During the course of relocating Fulton Avenue to enter Highway 79 at a new location, cave openings were discovered and voids were discovered. You can see in these pictures, some of these were big enough for people to enter. Kirk Juranis, the MoDOT district engineer in Northeast District at the time, was made aware of the Lost Boys incident from 1967, and he told the press, "There's a history here. There were 3 children that lived very close to this site. We know there's a local concern about those kids. We just need to be open and honest and share all the information we have so that people can trust we are doing the right thing." Former MoDOT environmental specialist Alan Leary, who's shown on the left, exiting a cave opening at Stoll School Cave, recruited the help of the Missouri Department of Conservation, the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, and the Missouri Speleological Survey to survey and map the new cave. Alan, when he learned of the Lost Boys Cave rediscovery that I'm talking about today, texted me, and he told me some of his memories about Stoll School Cave, and he said that it was okay for me to share this with you, put this in this presentation. He said, "I remember on my second trip to Hannibal, related to Stoll School Cave, I was listening to the radio on the way up there, and the DJ said MoDOT had brought in a cave expert that was going to do this and that today. I laughed and thought, MoDOT found the only idiot dumb enough to crawl into that hole, and I don't even know what my plan is for the day. I don't know how this radio station knows. I have such vivid memories of peeking my head out of that cave entrance and seeing all the cameras and microphones up on the hill waiting to talk with me, and I laid there on my belly and waved Kirk Juranis down to discuss with him what I knew. He said, okay, I'm going to walk you up there and introduce you and then get out of the way. It's up to you. And I remember some of the ridiculous questions the media asked me. But when Kirk walked me up, he was in a tie and I was wearing my caving helmet and clothes covered in clay." Just some of the pictures from the Stoll School Cave survey and mapping back in April of 2006. And some more photos. Some of these were taken by me. I was fortunate enough to be asked by Alan if I wanted to visit the cave and watch the cave mapping in progress, and so I took that opportunity and had never been in a wild cave before, so it had a profound impact on me. It was the first time I had seen a wild cave, and it was also eye-opening with regards to the mystery I'd heard about all my life. I saw people show up in caving gear and headlamps, hoping to get into the cave and resume the search after 39 years, with a mix of hope and sadness in their eyes, and that kind of hit me. When I walked into the cave and saw thick, wet mud, like what you see in the upper right photo, draining down to who knows where, made me think of how hard it would be to find those boys after all those years. Like Lost Boys Cave in 1967, the entrances to Stoll School Cave were filled, sealed, and paved over in April of 2006. Note in the photo at the bottom, the cracks in the pavement. That photo was taken in 2021. There are lots of patches, cracks like this up and down the hillside here in this vicinity, and they seem to correlate with potential passages below the surface of the road. and this one may be part of a passage that led to Stoll School Cave, which is just under the intersection in the background of this photo. You'll note the map on the right of Stoll School Cave. It was only a small cave, but our belief is that it was part of the larger Lost Boys Cave system at one time, and has either been cut off from the rest of the system through the construction process, the maintenance process of filling holes, or through natural processes. This is a statement from Jim Kaufman, the MDC cave biologist who was involved in the Stoll School Cave mapping. And I won't read it all, but it just shows that MoDOT received positive accolades from the caving community, from our natural resource partners about how we handled the situation. MoDOT was transparent and allowed for the proper authorities to explore the cave, not only do a biological survey, but also make sure that it was mapped and it was thoroughly searched to make sure that there were no remains inside. In 2007, there were geotechnical investigations that took place because of the discovery of Stoll School Cave the year prior. The Northeast District wanted to make sure that there were no other voids or cave passages beneath the roadway. So they did seismic refraction, electroresistivity, and multi-channel analysis of surface waves to investigate the possibility of these subsurface features. I'm not going to describe all of these graphics that are in the next few slides, but these just show some of the anomalies that we're seeing beneath the pavement. You can see the circles that show these anomalies. And this is from the refraction survey. This is the resistivity survey data, also showing some voids. And then this is the mass W survey data. This was all placed on top of a graphic that also shows the relationship to Stoll School Cave, which is in this vicinity, and also this shaded area, which shows where some of the sinkholes were located back in 1997. The geotechnical investigations that took place in 2007 resulted in the potential discovery of some anomalies below the surface of the road. And the recommendation of the study was to do some follow-up using borings conducted by an auger to probe the nature of these voids or potential voids. That additional investigation was conducted in 2008, and the results of that investigation determined that there were not any voids beneath the pavement. So again, that was 2008. So I'm going to fast forward now to more recent history. A property owner on Swan Street, which was near Highway 79, discovered a hole in his yard, or what he thought was his yard at the time, while he was mowing his grass. And this was sometime in 2019 or 2020. And he saw steam coming out of this hole in the winter. Incidentally, he had also discovered a new entrance to Murphy's Cave when he was widening the driveway at another property that he owned just off Highway 79, and he was turning that property into a bed and breakfast. So that new entrance to Murphy's Cave was widely shared on Facebook, and it came to the attention of two guys doing a podcast about the Lost Boys incident. So in early May of 2021, the guys that were doing the podcast stopped by the bread and breakfast to talk to the owner. During that conversation, they found out about the hole that was discovered at the property owner's residence on Swan Street, which was much nearer to where the Lost Boys cave system was. The podcast guys returned a few days later to look around the area where the hole was found, and they arranged a visit to the area with a geologist and a caving expert, both from Illinois, who they were working with. So when they brought the geologist and the caving expert in, they actually entered the hole and discovered that there was a large cave system beneath the surface, and they were amazed at the amount of passages. The podcasters wondered if the cave was actually on MoDOT at the time. So they reached out to MoDOT, and the way I became involved was on June 15th of 2021, I got a short email from one of our office staff to someone in the Northeast District in response to a request for cave maps, and the email had an allusion to the Stoll School Cave. On June 18th, I got a detailed email about another new cave in the area. This was not Stoll School Cave. And then on June 21st, 2021, we had a meeting with the Northeast District management. They decided to have the right-of-way surveyed to make sure that the cave was on MoDOT right-of-way. And so on June 22nd of 2021, myself and another representative from the Northeast District management met with the property owner on site just after the survey crews were finishing up. And this is what I initially walked upon. A board in the yard with some rocks, a bucket of scrap metal, and a traffic cone sitting on top of the board. And when all of that was taken away and the board was lifted up, this is what was underneath. A hole with a ladder in it. After talking with the property owner and informing him that the hole was not on his property but was on MoDOT right-of-way, I returned to my office in Hannibal and I gave one of the podcast guys a phone call to talk about what they had seen when they had entered the hole. He emailed me an aerial photograph with property lines. Those are the lines that are shown in yellow on this slide, and a set of lines emanating from a red dot near the center of this picture that represent his rough interpretation of where the cave passages are in relation to Highway 79. So the red dot is where the hole is located, and then the passageways or rough location of the passageways are shown in black. And they mainly trend toward the east, and then with perpendicular passages coming off of the main east-west passageway. This was a jaw-dropping moment for me when I saw this. I had no idea that the cave beneath the surface that I had just been standing on earlier that day was this vast. And I also noticed that passages went to a feature called the large concrete structure, which is also very close to where the sinkholes and the original Lost Boys Cave entrance from 1967 was located. So myself and also Northeast District Management went back to meet with the property owner shortly thereafter, and we wanted to make sure that safety, security, and secrecy were our top priorities. We did not want people to find out about this and try to enter into this cave in search of the lost boys. So we had to come up with a method to cover the hole, make sure it was locked. We used a modified traffic control box because it was lightweight, could be carried to the site, and we weighted it down with sandbags on the inside. We didn't want to cover up anything, but we didn't want to attract attention to something that could be a hazard to people in the area. And again, there is a grade school in the vicinity, and we didn't want children entering this feature. So on July 2nd of 2021, I spoke with Jeff Cruz of Missouri DNR in the Missouri Geological Survey to come up and have a visit. And we met with the landowner, had a conversation with him, and proceeded to secure the entrance. I also reached out to the Department of Natural Resources, MSS, Cave Research Foundation, and the Missouri Bat Census to start planning visits and surveys. And now this is sort of the confusing part. This map looks nothing like the rough layout that Chris Ketters of the podcast provided to me. If you recall the pictures of the lines that were emanating from the east to the west and the north to the south, and this does not look anything like it. This was the broad map that was discovered shortly after I contacted MSS, and they retrieved it from their archives. So it was a bit confusing to try to figure out, or were we even talking about the same cave system? But then, shortly thereafter, it started making more sense because MSS found this rough sketch of the passageways from Jerry Vineyard, who was on the search crew back in 1967. And although the north arrow is pointing in the wrong direction, this is the correct north, these passages here are what are depicted on the broad map, but they were only a part of the larger cave system, and this part here is much more reminiscent of what Chris Ketters provided to me. So in July of 2021, we were able to get a crew together to begin the first survey attempt. This occurred on July 30th of 2021. And you'll note there's an old auger blade in the side of the shaft going down into the hole. This is a photo taken at the bottom of the hole looking up. Here are the crew members that were on that initial survey. Myself and my employee, Senior Environmental Specialist Sammy Ostman, were also on site. We did not go into the cave, but we let the professionals do their work. And our top priority was safety, stability, and survey. We wanted to make sure that everyone was safe. We wanted to make sure that the shaft leading down to the cave system was stable, and we wanted to get enough of a survey completed that we could determine whether or not this was actually the Lost Boys Cave from 1967, or if it was a completely different cave system. Here are some of the photos that were taken during that July 30th, 2021 visit. There's evidence of past visits, such as this survey marker, this bottle. You can see that the passageways are very narrow, but very tall. This is very similar to Stoll School Cave. Same type of limestone formations. Here's some additional pictures from July 30th. These are the concrete plugs. There's 3 of them. Only one, this one here, can be squeezed under. The rest are up against the bottom of the cave system. These are concrete plugs that were put in 1967 when the search was complete, and they were sealing up the entrances. This particular concrete plug has water that is entering into it and has eroded out underneath, which is why the adventurous cave explorer can squeeze in underneath to access additional passageway. Some more photographs. The Pepsi bottle is from the late 1950s or early 1960s. There's an old metal canteen here that still had water in it, and it was sealed up. It's facing down, so it's likely the same water that was in it when it was either brought into or washed into the cave system. And then this, we believe, is a drill shaft for placing charges from back in 1967. Some additional survey markers. These are from 1967. These actually match up with notes on the broad map. And then some additional features. This is an area of instability in the cave where this blue-gray Hannibal shale formation has broken through the limestone of the ceiling of the cave and is washing in. It's an area that we need to keep an eye on. You'll notice the water coming in at this location. These are also rootlets that are coming through the ceiling of the cave. These are also mentioned in Langbrod's description from 1967, and they match up perfectly with his map. And again, another photo that illustrates just how narrow and tall these passageways are within the cave system. All in all, it was a safe and a successful trip. And it also, most importantly, confirmed that it is Lost Boys Cave. These individuals here, Jeff Cruz from DNR and Mark Jones from the Cave Research Foundation, were able to survey some points and tie them into the 1967 map. We did a little bit of rough placement of known features on aerial photographs just to try to figure out how things could be fitting together. This was put together by Chris Ketters of the podcast. It shows the location of Stoll School Cave here, the entrance to Lost Boys Cave that was discovered that we were entering into. The dark, thick blue lines show the surveyed passages that were completed in July of 2021, and then tying into some GPS coordinates, some GPS lines that were taken during that survey as well. And so there's an area labeled here as area of reported instability. That is actually not the location. It should actually be in this vicinity here. So it could be beneath the shoulder of the road or just inside the ditch line, and we're closely monitoring that particular area. I took some time in August of last year to look at some of the features on the surface to see if I could see anything that might indicate what's going on beneath. And this is an area that we call the Waterfall, where water comes down off of the hillside, off of the Hannibal shale, and it comes down to the road ditch, which is just outside of this picture. What this shows is the blue-green Hannibal shale formation, and it's meeting with the Louisiana limestone where the caves are formed. This is a concrete plug in the ditch. This may be the top of one of the concrete plugs that we're seeing underground and would have been placed there in 1967. This is an existing hole in the ditch that drains surface water into the subsurface, likely into some of the cave passageways. And this is a road patch that you can see water seeping from between the cracks. This happens for days after a rain. And on this ditch, on the other side of the road, water will be flowing through this ditch and then just disappears like a losing stream. So it's entering into the passageways beneath the surface. So in October, we decided to further stabilize the cave entrance to make sure that it was stable and safe for a planned later major mapping expedition. And so in order to do that, the auger blade had to be cut out from the entrance. It was widened and a 30-inch by 14 feet culvert pipe was slipped in order to stabilize the earth around the entrance. We didn't want there to be any sorts of cave-ins. This was a very successful partnership between MoDOT, the Cave Research Foundation, and the Missouri Bat Census to get this taken care of. They provided the labor, MoDOT provided the supplies and the access to the right-of-way. After the pipe was placed, a concrete pad was poured around the pipe, and the same traffic control box that we have been using as a temporary security measure was bolted into the concrete and locked up, closed up, and a padlock was also added to the locking mechanism for additional security. So in February of 2022, the first of the major mapping explorations was slated to take place. And the top priorities were safety and survey. We wanted to make sure that the cave didn't have any areas that were extremely dangerous. We wanted to make sure that we got an accurate survey, so some of the best cavers in the nation were brought in to help out with this effort on a voluntary basis as well. They came in, they did a full biological assessment, which yielded no uncommon species, very little biological resources within the cave itself. There are no bats in the cave, which is not surprising since it doesn't have any entrances or exits that are accessible or that have been accessible for a long time. Also a cultural resources investigation. We're still awaiting the results of that, but things like the water bottle and the Pepsi bottle, things of that nature were collected by archaeologists and taken for cataloging and also descriptions. There's some photos from that exploration in February 2022. And again, some photos of the cave surveyors exiting or entering into the system. It was a very successful operation, but it also revealed some things to keep an eye on. So these pictures were taken in February. There's some additional holes on the surface that need to be kept an eye on. These don't appear to currently lead to the main passageways, but they could lead to passages that are cut off from the main passageways. Both of these holes are greater than 20 feet in length, and they're just big enough for a small person to get inside. So we have plans for future exploration, believe it or not, of these features to see where they lead. This is also a hole that's forming at the base of that concrete plug where water is coming in. You can see the space underneath the plug where people can actually squeeze through, but there's also a hole that's being eroded from the water that's coming in and dripping off of this feature. We want to keep an eye on that too. And then of course this area of instability that where the Hannibal shale is coming into the cave system is probably the biggest concern to keep an eye on and to try to figure out exactly where it is located in relation to the road surface and also the ditch line. So our next steps are to complete the mapping. It is such a big cave system that the surveys that were done in February were not able to complete this effort. So there will be additional explorations and mapping that takes place in the future. We're hoping for some in the summer of 2022. We're hoping to review the reports that began with the February mapping. We want to investigate these other holes, like I mentioned, that were discovered in the vicinity and see if they lead into other cave passageways. We want to monitor those holes and also the areas within the cave that appear to be unstable. And we want to continue working with our partners to make sure that they are included in this effort. This has been a huge team effort, not only from the caving community, but also the podcasters, the adjacent property owner who thought the cave was on his property. There are a lot of different stakeholders that are involved with this. And then, most importantly, we want to make sure that the public is aware of what is going on, but that they're safe. We don't want anyone getting hurt and another Lost Boys incident occurring. So that's our biggest goal, is to make sure that everyone is safe. So for more information, I mentioned that you can find additional theories, additional insight into this incident that took place 55 years ago at these locations. There's books, there's podcasts, there's websites. So feel free to check out these resources. So I want to wrap up this presentation today by bringing it back to the three boys who were lost on May 10th of 1967 and never seen again. This cave that I've been talking about today does not have any endangered species. It does not have any spectacular cave formations. It's not a show cave. It doesn't have any evidence of prehistoric visits from Native Americans. There's no artifacts, no paintings on the walls. But what it does have is a history that's important to a community and to families of these boys and the people that knew them. It's the site of the largest cave rescue operation in U.S. history, and the only one where the subjects of the search were never found. It's on MoDOT right-of-way, and the events of May 10th of 1967 took place during the construction of a Missouri Highway Commission roadway. It's part of MoDOT's organizational history, and one that deserves to be remembered. As I record this today, it's 55 years to the day of when those events took place. And when I drive home this evening and I pass by Lover's Leap Hill, I'll remember Craig and Joey and Billy. And I hope this presentation has been interesting and informative, and I hope that you too will remember the three lost boys. Thank you for your time today.